Hello, I'm Clovis Casali in Paris. Welcome to Face Off, the show that brings you the latest on French politics. New unemployment figures have been released, and bad news. The number of people seeking work in France has risen to a total record high of over 3.5 million people. As May Day approaches, Union are preparing for their annual rally, and so is the far-right National Front. But for the first time, its controversial founder JeanMarie Le Pen might not address his troops. His daughter, Marine Le Pen, has vetoed his presence on stage. To discuss all of these issues with me today, two senior reporters, Philippe Turle from radio station RFI and Jean-Marc Gonin from Le Figaro magazine. Welcome to the two of you. First question to you, Jean-Marc. Coming back to those unemployment figures, were they to be expected, even though there was a slight glimpse of hope in January?
Well, the government and François Hollande himself was expecting some kind of fair weather in that respect, and obviously it's not the case. I think once again he's punished because he has done the wrong policy, and that's the flaw with François Hollande. He has always counted on his luck. He has a career that is marked by luck, but on this very front of employment, he's done a very poor job.
And we just saw nearly plus 5% since March of last year, so nearly plus 5% within a year. And you don't think it's due to the economic climate?
No. It's the fruit of a wrong policy. And if you look at the rest of Europe, the Eurozone, employment is getting a lot better, whereas in France it's getting worse. So
and do you agree with that?
There is a problem.
Do you agree with that? Do you think it's about? Is it not about bold reforms? Do you think he's not carrying out bold enough reforms?
Okay, 2 points. First one, I think on the first point that the government was really hoping for good news. They're putting all the eggs in one basket. If we're going to bring down unemployment, then we will, François Hollande says, if I can bring it down, I'll run for election in 2017. So he's depending on this lowering of the unemployment rate, which just doesn't come. And I don't know whether or not he was really expecting it. He was hoping there'd be some good news like there was in January, but there wasn't. So it's a big deception. Second point, I think that the government hasn't done enough to encourage people to invest in France, to encourage the public to spend more money, the public to buy more products in this country, which therefore would create more jobs. And the big problem is that there's no economic growth in France. It's stagnating at the same level, 0.3, 0.4%. And the government knows it needs at least 1.5% to start with, to even have any hope that the unemployment rate is going to come down. So I can't believe that he thought with 0.4% growth as it's expected at the moment, there was any hope the unemployment rate would come down. They tried these timid measures like boosting traineeships for young people in companies, or accompanying people who were at the end of their career in a bid to take over from them. But it's not enough. It's just not enough to bring down that unemployment.
Well, let's talk about that issue.
Expenses it's too heavy. I mean, he hasn't delivered on this. All Europe is asking for it. The governor of the Bank of France is saying that, but they can't cut in the public expenses.
No austerity.
Yes.
Let's talk about that issue of trainees. You just mentioned it. Last week, François Hollande announced that the state, the French government, would encourage apprenticeships of under-18s working for small companies by paying their salaries, at least for the first year. Is that a good measure to tackle unemployment among French youths?
To bring them to cross the threshold of employment, of a first job, that might be helpful. Because, as we see in France, the very difficulty for young people is to get their first job. So they get a foot in the door with that system. But this said, there's still... Why is it the case in France that young people have a difficulty to get a job? It is because the so-called working code, the network of laws that protect people that are employed, are an enormous obstacle for young people to get their first job. And that won't be reformed.
And François Hollande has always said that he would only stand for re-election if he managed to reverse unemployment figures. In other words, create hundreds of thousands of jobs. Can he do it? His entourage is optimistic. Let's take a listen to Junior Minister JeanMarie Le Pen.
We know that growth is starting to get going again, and that with growth there will be more jobs. We believe, all things considered, that at the end of the summer or the beginning of the autumn, France will see fairly substantial growth. Our economic policy will be fruitful, and François Hollande will be our candidate.
Philippe, Jean-Marc,
What they're hoping.
do you think President Hollande will achieve that goal? Do you think that he's going to manage to do that? And do you think that even if he doesn't manage to reverse those figures, he'll stand for re-election anyway?
It's difficult to say. We've already had one failed deadline, which was the end of 2013, when President Hollande said, by the end of 2013, I will inverse the unemployment rate, which he didn't manage to do. What he's saying is he wants 3 months of a lowering of the unemployment rate to say, OK, we've got there, it's now coming down. He's only had 4 months of the unemployment rate going down since he was elected in May 2012. So he's not doing very well on that count. So they're putting all their hope in the last 2 years of this mandate that somewhere along the line growth will improve and unemployment will come down. But as the months tick by and every time we get the unemployment rate for the month in question and it shows another increase, it's looking increasingly difficult. They really need a good piece of luck. But I don't really know where they're going to find it.
And Jean-Marc, you're convinced that François Hollande will stand for re-election, or at least that he wants to stand for re-election?
I think he'll run. He might, if he doesn't deliver, as Philippe says, he'll run even if he doesn't succeed. But then he will have some challenger in the socialist primaries.
Let's now move on to another big story, and that's with the French far right, the National Front, and this ongoing family feud among the Le Pen. Marine Le Pen's father is more than ever a problem, an obstacle in her attempt to undemonize the party and to reach power, first with his anti-Semitic outburst, and now with allegations that he had a secret bank account in Switzerland, 2.2 million euros. Has there ever been such turmoil at the National Front since Marine Le Pen took over nearly 4 years ago?
No, I don't think so. Not between father and daughter, there hasn't. I mean, JeanMarie Le Pen's always been known as being a bit, dare I say, crooked as far as his finances are concerned, because he inherited a load of money from the former owner of a cement company with which he bought...
in dubious circumstances.
Right, in a huge house in the west of Paris, having come from very modest backgrounds. And now this latest development in his financial situation of these hidden gold bars and coins and money stashed away in Switzerland.
1.7 million in gold bars
That's
and
right.
coins.
Sounds like a scene out of Goldfinger.
Exactly.
So anyway, I was listening to an imitator comedian on French radio today who was imitating Marine Le Pen talking to the Swiss authorities, who was saying, well, your father's in big trouble, you know, because he's been caught with lots of money in this country. And she was saying, what are you going to do? And they said, well, we might have to put him in prison. And she was saying, oh, that's a very good idea. So if he was put away and out of the picture, I think she'd be relieved, because they're not getting on. And he's a constant thorn in her side. So this is just going to be another unwelcome piece of news just ahead of this May Day rally.
And this is clearly going to tarnish the image of the party, who wants it to be spotless clean.
Yes, Jean-Marie Le Pen is becoming a big liability now for the party. And this on two counts, because, again, the tension between father and daughter will increase. And second point, I mean, she has been campaigning with more or less very leftist argument on the topics of wealth and capitalism, etc. And suddenly you discover that the father has hidden like almost 2 million in Switzerland. It doesn't look good for the image of a party who says we have our hands clean.
And I'm convinced that in Jean-Marie Le Pen's head, the National Front is his baby. He created it. He should have the final word. And he's not going to let his daughter get away with it. So he's going to be a constant problem till the end of his life. He's 87 years old. He's not going to go quietly. And
May Day is approaching. France 24 will of course be reporting from Paris for May Day, and it's set to be an interesting one, a traditional far-right rally, and lots of tensions to be expected, because for the first time, Jean-Marie Le Pen, the historic founder, is set to keep quiet, not to address his supporters. And that's never happened in nearly 30 years. What's going to happen, do you think, on May the 1st, Philip?
Well, he could toe the line like he did recently and say, OK, I'm not going. He just recently agreed not to run for office in the south of France. It's going to be his granddaughter who's going to take his place, Maréchal Le Pen. He could toe the line this time round and say, OK, they don't want me to speak. I'm not going to. But there again, he could say, I don't care. It's my party. I'm the one who created it. If I want to speak, I will speak. Be interesting to see what happens.
I think he will speak somehow. Not on the stage, but he will give some interview to bother his daughter.
I think the temptation may be too great, but it depends how Marine Le Pen herself handles it on that day.
I can tell you all of the journalists, including us, will be around JeanMarie Le Pen to try to pick up a sentence or two. This will be the first time we said that he will probably not be addressing the crowd. Is it the end of JeanMarie Le Pen's political career? Because it clearly seems to be.
No. It's not, because he's still the honorary president of the National Front, and while he's alive, while he's able to speak, while he's able to move about, he will constantly do things. And it's going to be very difficult, even if he doesn't, if he doesn't toe the line. He says anti-Semitic, racist remarks. He's found having a secret bank account in Switzerland. It doesn't make any difference. He's still going to be up there to say things what he thinks, and maybe even to chide his daughter also, because the bottom line was that JeanMarie Le Pen was a person who liked creating a polemic. His daughter wants to take power, which he never did. So he doesn't really care anymore, I don't think, about that.
Well, Philippe, Jean-Marc, thank you very much. It's the end of Face Off. Stay tuned. More news to follow on France 24.